So how do I get access to music, and what does it mean to my business model? Who are the different people I need to work with in order to source the right rights for my business model? So this is what we want to kind of cover today, and on the panel today we have representatives from different constituencies of the music business that can speak to what each one of the constituencies you can see on the screen here actually are in charge of, and how it might apply to your plans for your startup, your future business in the music space. So let's introduce everybody just briefly. Please say who you are. We'll start with you, Shawn. Say who you are real briefly and what you do.
Can everybody hear? Is that on? Okay. Yeah, my name's Shawn Nolan. I'm an attorney at Jonathan Leonard PC. I've been there for about 7 years now. And we handle primarily entertainers, but primarily musicians. Our firm represents producers, writers, performers. Some of our more notable clients are Janelle Monáe, T.I. We represent Grand Hustle Records as well as Merge Records out of Chapel Hill. And we represent even people like YouTube artists like Megan and Liz and Tiffany Alford. So it's all across the board. Before that, I worked at Sub Pop Records in Seattle, Washington. And prior to that, I worked at Mammoth Records and managed bands based in North Carolina.
Hi everyone, my name is Ping, and I'm part of Warner Music Group's Global Digital Strategy and Business Development team. So we're based in New York. Forgive me if I'm a bit sleepy. I took a 6 a.m. flight this morning. And what I focus on for the team is primarily digital, digital deals that could be just US focused or on a global basis. So on our team, I'm primarily the lead on all things innovation related. So I talk to a lot of startups. I'm very interested to always find out what's new and trending, and and I'm constantly trying to find out what are the next business models that could really push the envelope when it comes to generating incremental revenues for music, creating new marketing channels for our artists, etc. So I look forward to hearing from all of you. One quick question: how many of you are digital entrepreneurs and are thinking about forming a new business? Great. Okay. Wow. Cool.
I'm David Barbe. I am the director of the University of Georgia Music Business Program, where I've been for 4 years. I'm also an engineer-producer. I own Chase Park Transduction Recording Studios in Athens, where people amazingly come to Athens, Georgia from all over the world to make records. Animal Collective, Drive-By Truckers, Deer Hunter, Booker T, Betty Levette. We have a nice, broad-based group of people that come there. I do 3 or 4 other things too. I don't get nearly enough sleep.
God, I know the feeling. I am Peniece, LeGall, the director of SESAC's Writer-Publisher Relations Department. We represent all genres, and coolly enough, I get to work with folks in every genre. So from Bob Dylan and Neil Diamond to MGMT and Swiss Beats and Rico Love, it's a great variety of songwriters. I started as a singer-songwriter, and so to be an executive that sits in the seat, I can really be in tune with my creative folks and know what they want, and then still show them how to meet the bottom line because I'm in the boardroom too. So it's a really cool place to be, and I'm happy to be here with y'all.
Fantastic. So we've prepared a couple of presentation slides here. Some of these you'll find in the decks in front of you, but we did deviate a little bit, and we'll introduce a few other slides that are not necessarily in your decks throughout the day too, so just don't be alarmed when you see that they don't necessarily match. On this particular grid, what we're trying to show are the basics, the types of use you would normally find in a marketplace, and how they relate to recording, ownership, the record company, mechanical and publishing, and then PROs, performance rights organizations. Let's start with maybe going through the panel and asking how do you interact from the perspective of the IP you control or interact with, and how do you interact with different entities in a marketplace? If it's startups, if it's iTunes, if it's Pandora, if it's established entities or startups, what are the roles that you play, and how do you view those relationships? Maybe start with you, Shawn.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a quick sort of synopsis of some of the rights that we're going to be talking about here first. And what people don't understand is it's not just about copyright. There's other rights that are also involved, whether you be an artist and you're trying to sign to a recording agreement, or you are putting a video on YouTube, or you want to use a particular celebrity's image in marketing your product. The three intellectual property rights that most people refer to when they're dealing with music are trademarks, which is essentially identifying your good or service from any other good or service out there in the use of commerce. The right of publicity, which is essentially your state, your right in your name and likeness, and it's mandated by state statute. And then the copyright, which is a bundle of rights that are afforded by federal statute in an original expression of an idea. And so those are the three things that I'm going to address when it comes to these various rights. All of these points and all of these rights are important because anytime you're going to do an agreement, you're going to see these sort of rights granted in that contract depending on the nature of your business and depending on the agreement. If I'm an artist, I have to make sure that I have the rights in the songs that I'm recording, make sure that I wrote the songs myself, or if I didn't write the songs myself, I need to make sure that I've got those rights from somebody else who was the writer, so that I can then assign those rights to a record label. Same with your trademark. You want to make sure that you don't have a trademark that someone else is using. Some people say, I want to be, DJ Smooth. Well, there's probably a zillion DJ Smooths at this point, but I think there's only one really original that owns the rights. So you need to make sure that you're going to like the United States Patent and Trademark Office website and looking for those trademarks to make sure you're not starting your business foundation on something that's going to get pulled away from you later. So that's where the trademark comes into play, because you're going to be assigning these rights to all of these various entities that want to use your music. And if you are a startup, you want to make sure that you are, whenever you're, you want to make sure you're obtaining those rights so that whenever you are promoting this particular artist, you actually have that right to grant. So those three rights, right of publicity, copyright, and trademark, are what you're really going to look for in any number of these agreements. We primarily represent artists, and so we're making sure that our artists, whenever we're doing a deal with Spotify or iTunes or any number of other digital companies, that all of our artists have all the paperwork in place so that we can feel comfortable in doing the contracts and granting these rights to these various companies. That's our role, is really protecting the artists to make sure that when we're giving these indemnifications and making sure that the companies that we're granting these rights to, they always have an indemnification clause in the agreement that says, hey, if, by the way, these rights that you've said you're granting to us, if somebody else has a claim on that, we're going to come back after you. And every agreement you're going to do, you're going to see one of these clauses in there. So you want to make sure that, as an artist, you actually, what you're proposing in these agreements, you have the rights to all of these various things.
How many of your artists surrender those rights to the labels and publishers to negotiate for them versus those that keep it these days for sort of do-it-yourself efforts?
It depends, because we really run the gambit on developing artists, and so with the developing artists, we have to explain all of these various rights in detail to make sure that they understand. They don't just tell us, oh yeah, I've got that right, and they don't even understand the type of right that they're claiming to have, and that happens really regularly. A lot of people don't understand that in a sound recording, you actually have two different copyrights. You have the recording itself, which anybody that is performed on that particular recording, theoretically, unless there's a writing to the contrary, they own a share of the copyright in that recording. Then there's the person that wrote the song. Maybe it was the singer, maybe it was all four of the people in the band, or three people in the band. But absent a writing to the contrary, the people that wrote the song are the people that came up with it collectively at the time that that it was put in a tangible medium.
But David, from your perspective as an artist and a producer, how do you get involved in right management?
How you get involved in rights management, from my standpoint as a writer and an artist, is to educate yourself, understand what your rights are, and referencing what Shawn just discussed, understand that there is, of course, the copyright, the ownership of the recording, but that what it all stems off of is there is the song, and there's the recording of the song, and everything else stems off those two things. what you've got to do is understand the value of what you own. And I personally believe that there is nothing more valuable to a young artist or writer, any creative person in the music industry, than owning your own intellectual property. And I think a lot of people get lured by what seems like a significant amount of money if they're offered some sort of publishing deal or some sort of record deal where they're going to be signing away their rights. And again, it depends on how much money it is. If you have a song catalog and someone offers you $1 million, $1 million is a lot of money. If someone comes along and offers you $10,000, but you make $8 an hour working at Wendy's to support yourself as a musician, $10,000 seems like a lot of money. But when you really think about how fast that $10,000 is going to be spent on rent, phone, blah, blah, yakety yak, whatever, it's nothing, especially when you look at the fact that ultimately your intellectual property is an income-generating annuity. And this is a point that I hammer home to young bands I work with all the time. I recently worked on a record with a band, and these guys are in the early 20s, and they write their own stuff. They do have a record deal. They were offered a publishing deal, which was cash on the barrelhead for full publishing deal. My advice was, do not take the money, sign an admin deal instead where you own everything and give somebody else a percentage to administer the rights for you. Find someone at a PRO such as Peniece who can help you navigate these waters. But I feel pretty strongly that you've just got to weigh the costs and the benefits to you. But in most instances, what people need to realize, I think, young creative people, is once you sell something, you can never sell it a second time. It's way better to maintain ownership of your intellectual property and find the right people, build your team to administer those rights for you.
Go ahead.
I'd like to just add on to that, because once the $10,000 is gone, I've had a client say to me, "Oh, you want to use that song for this? It's fine. I'm granting you the right. It's cool." And I'm like, it's no longer your decision. So even though the split is you 75 and the publisher is 25, and you no longer have the majority share, or you no longer control your copyright, so you can't grant it on your behalf. And I know there are some companies that will say, we're not going to sign off on a license unless it's over $10,000. And so if you've spent your 10 grand and you have a friend, say Sela, that works over at Turner, and they're like, hey, we'll give you this, there's a great opportunity, you can get 6 grand and your performing rights money. If you're in a pub deal and you're broke, good luck, because you no longer control your publishing. So you can't even seize that opportunity from your friend that's over here, because your publishing company doesn't do deals under $10,000, and you no longer have the right to grant permission to use your own music. So,
well, this is really interesting. I want to come back to this topic and really explore how artists that do not necessarily grant those rights or do those partnerships, how do they actually compete later on with the might of the bigger companies, when artists that did partner with bigger companies. But we do have a few slides from you, Peniece, and later on for Ping, to kind of present your value proposition from a PRO and publishing perspective, and later on from a label perspective, and then maybe we can come back to, well, how do these constituencies compare? Artists that full-fledged use these bigger corporations to help their careers versus those that decide to do it themselves, and then maybe what tools are available for them. And there's so many startups out there these days. There's a real paradigm shift with the whole do-it-yourself, direct-to-fan constituency, and a lot of different new tools that are created all the time. A lot of opportunities for startups that are creating those tools for those artists. So I think it's important to acknowledge that paradigm shift and talk about the dynamics between the older school and the new school of thought behind how to promote an artist.